Revelation chapter 11. Before we get started, it helps me to kind of have an idea about where we are in the time of Revelation. Up until now, first 10 chapters, everything has been pretty much in chronological order. The first part of chapter 11, we're backing up in time. Although we're really not backing up in time because these things haven't occurred yet. But as far as our study in Revelation goes. Chapter 10, I believe we were in year 7 of the tribulation. Chapter 11, at least the first part of chapter 11, we're backing up in time to, I think, and I could be wrong, but I think we're at the midpoint of the tribulation when we start chapter 11. Now, as we get down to the end, to the middle of chapter 11, we're back in chronological order. We're back at the end, or toward the end of the tribulation, I think year 7. Did all that rambling to say this. So we start in verse 1. And there was given to me a reed like unto a rod. I think the first time I said a tape measure, but that's not right. He had a yardstick. He didn't have a tape measure. He had a yardstick. And the angel stood, saying, Rise and measure the temple of God, and the altar, and them that worship therein. So why was John told to measure the temple? Like chapter 10, we don't know. There's a lot in chapter 11 we don't know. Possibly this was God's way of telling John, who in turn is telling us, that the temple belongs to God. No matter who is occupying it, no matter what's going on, ultimately the temple belongs to God. Verse 2 says, But the court which is without the temple leave out, and measure it not, for it is given unto the Gentiles. I believe I mentioned this the first go-round. The innermost court of the temple was reserved just for the priest. Next to that, it was for the Jewish men. Then next to that would be all Jews, men and women. Then the outermost court was for the Gentiles. Where are we in Revelation at this point? The midpoint of Revelation. What happens at the midpoint of Revelation? Satan takes over, and we're going to see. Satan takes over Jerusalem. Satan, the Antichrist, who is Satan in fleshly form, enters into the temple, desecrates the temple, puts up images, idols of himself. So it says, given unto the Gentiles. Who are the Gentiles? Non-Jews. The world. Who controls the world at this time in our study? Satan. And the holy city, that being Jerusalem, shall they tread underfoot anything, everything that Satan touches. What happens? He destroys it. Satan, the Antichrist, has taken over Jerusalem at this point, and it says, and they shall tread underfoot. Just going to destroy it. 40 and 2 months, which is how long? 3.5 years. This is not the first 3.5 years of the tribulation. This is the second, the latter 3.5 years. Verse 3. And I will give power unto my 2 witnesses. Who are they? We don't know. A lot of speculation, a lot of thoughts, a lot of ideas, but in reality, we really don't know who they are. And they shall prophesy. They're going to preach. They are going to preach their heart out. They're going to give it everything they have under the most difficult situation that man has ever been in. And they're going to preach. They're going to preach hard. How long? 1,260 days. How long is that? 3.5 years. The same 3.5 years that we just read about in verse 2. The last 3.5 years. And it says, clothed in sackcloth. These two men will be hated. Not just disliked. They will be hated under the strictest definition of the word hate. These two men will be hated. And when it says clothed in sackcloth, they're not going to try to hide. It's not going to be that they run out on Sunday and give a rip-roaring, stirring sermon for 30 minutes, then they run back and they hide. No, for 3.5 years, 7 days a week, they will be in the public preaching their heart out. Verse 4 says, these, talking about the two witnesses, are the two olive trees and two candlesticks standing before the God of the earth. What does this symbolize? What does this represent? Like chapter 10. Don't know. Possibly an olive tree. This is just a possibility. An olive tree will grow pretty much where nothing else will grow. It will thrive where nothing else will thrive. It will produce fruit under circumstances that nothing else can do that. In a way, not in a way, but that represents these two witnesses. They will do things, they will thrive when basically it's impossible for humans to thrive. What point of the tribulation are we in now? The last 3.5 years. We've been studying. We're through, well, actually, this is kind of a pause. Jesus, the Lamb, is opening the 7th seal. So, I mean, the conditions of the world are horrible. Verse 5. And if any man will hurt them, fire proceedeth out of their mouth, and devoureth their enemies. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. God is going to take that big old hand of his. He's going to wrap it around these men, under these men, over these men. God's hand is going to totally encapsulate these two witnesses. He's going to protect them. Nothing, absolutely nothing, no one, anyone, whatever is proper English, will be able to hurt these two men. Go back to what we've been reading. The condition of the world. Literally, the sky is falling. I mean, we've read that numerous times. These two men will be out in it. They're not going to be in a cave hidden. They're going to be out in the streets. They're going to be where people will see them, where people will hear them. They're going to be protected. Anyone that tries to harm them, kill them, when I say anyone, a lot, I believe, now this is my personal belief, a lot of attempts will be made to kill these two men. Do you think at this point in the tribulation, there will be law like we have it now? There will be policemen like we have it now? Who is in charge? The Antichrist. Pure evil. I think Satan, the Antichrist, will encourage their assassination, their deaths. But look what it says. And if any man will hurt them, he must in this manner be killed. All attempts to harm these two men, these two witnesses, will be met by the death of those that try to do the harm. Personally, Y'all don't have to believe like this. I'm left-handed, so I think different than y'all do. I think, or I don't think, that an attempt will be made against these men's lives, and then whoever, whatever person, whatever group of people, a few months later will all of a sudden get this strange illness or be in an accident and die. I don't think that's how that's going to be. I don't think an attempt to kill these men will be done. I don't think there's going to be a sniper a mile away hidden in some building. I think Satan will encourage their death in public. I think, here again, my thoughts, that when an attempt is made against these men's lives, whoever made that attempt will die just like that, right then and there, for everyone to see, everyone to know what happened and why they just died. Verse 6, these, talking about the two witnesses, have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy, and have power over waters to turn them to blood and smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Okay. Revelation 11, verse 1, I think we're at the midpoint of the tribulation. As we read verses, I think we're getting deeper and deeper in time into the last 3.5 years. What has happened that we've already studied? A third of the sea has turned to blood. A third of all drinking water is poisoned. Verse 6, these have power to shut heaven, that it rain not in the days of their prophecy. They will be able to cause a drought. No more fresh water that's added to only the 2/3 that's remaining. So there's going to be a shortage of water. No water, no food. And to smite the earth with all plagues as often as they will. Here again, I don't know what these all plagues are. Possibly, just possibly, it's the same plagues that Moses was allowed to bring against the Egyptians when he was trying to lead the Israelites out of Egypt, just possibly. Verse 7, and when they shall have finished their testimony. This is not saying when God's through with them. This is not saying that God's going to turn his back on them. God's going to say, oh, I'm done with you. You're on your own now. That's not what this is saying. And when they shall have finished their testimony. How long have they preached? 3.5 years. Under the most difficult of circumstances that exist at this time. This shows God's mercy. For 3.5 years, every day, when people hate, and I mean hate in the truest sense of the term, hate these men, hate God, he's still offering all these people that hate him the chance, the opportunity to be saved. So after the 3.5 years, it's kind of like, I've given you every chance I can. And when they shall have finished their testimony, the beast that ascendeth out of the bottomless pit shall make war against them and shall overcome them and kill them. Once again, my personal thought. Satan, at this point, he is going to be so angry, so furious. God removes his protective hand from these two men. I think their death will be instantaneous. I don't think it's going to be some long, drawn-out, torturous, agonizing death. I think Satan is just going to be so angry that, poof, God's taking his hand, protective hand away from them, and bam, Satan kills them just like that, in an instant. I don't think they're going to have to suffer. And then, this is my interpretation, this is going to be Satan. I just killed him. And he's going to be angry because he did it so quickly. So he's going to get even with them in verse 8 and 9. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of the great city. Is that these two men lying there? What is it? It's flesh and bone. It's not them. And their dead bodies shall lie in the street of that great city. Antichrist is not going to allow people to bury them, which spiritually is called Sodom and Egypt, where also our Lord was crucified, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3 days and a half, and shall not suffer their dead bodies to be put in graves. I do not understand this verse. Let me be just totally upfront and honest with you. I do not understand this. We're at, right now, I think we're really, really, really close to the end of the second 3.5 years. We're really close to the end of the 7 years. I've said this. I don't think there's going to be electricity. I don't think there's going to be gas. The air quality of the earth, we've read this over and over, is going to be horrible. But then, right here, it says, and they of the people and kindreds and tongues and nations shall see their dead bodies 3.5 days. How is Satan going to do that? You say, well, video cameras. That doesn't work with that electricity. Satellites are just going to be all in a mess. But as we get into it, Revelation, Satan has great power. Impossibly. I don't know. Right.
Yeah, he is.
Somehow, Satan, I think, I could be wrong, is going to have some type of apparatus set up. TV, video camera, I don't know. But it says right here in verse 9, the world will see these dead bodies. They will see what the people in Jerusalem are doing to these dead bodies. Dragging them through the street, kicking them, spitting on them, stomping dust on them. For 3.5 days, somehow, Satan is going to be able to, broadcast this. And the people will see it. The world will see it. Verse 10. And they that dwell upon the earth, the world, shall rejoice over them and make merry and shall send gifts one to another, because these two prophets tormented them that dwelt on the earth. Blows my mind right here.
It's gonna be Christmas.
And what's the condition of the world at this time? It's horrible. The living conditions are just nearly not.
How could you even buy gifts?
Yeah. How? And on top of that, the two men that offered them hope, the two men that had the truth, that had the way out for them, they're going to be rejoicing that the truth has been taken from them. Or the ones that proclaim the truth has been taken from them. They're going to rejoice that Satan, in this brief instant in time, has won. The one that's brought all these troubles on them, they're going to be happy that he's winning the battle in their minds. We realize that's not how it happens, but they're going to be happy about it. In verse 11, and after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of life from God entered into them. When they died, it's kind of like They took their coat off. They threw it on the ground. And the people took that coat and they were just dragging it through the street, spitting on that coat, stomping on that coat, kicking dust on that coat. And God says, guys, why don't you go down there and pick that coat up? Because that's all that body was. It's just a coat. And after 3 days and a half, the Spirit of God, of life from God entered into them, and they stood up on their feet. What's happened the last 3.5 days? There's a party going on. Everybody is watching somehow. They're watching. I think that video is going to be trained on these 2 dead bodies. And then all of a sudden, they're going to stand up. They're going to knock the dust off of them. They might even try to fix their hair. I don't know. Look what it says. And great fear fell upon them which saw them. The world goes silent. When these 2 men stand up, they are terrified. No one saying anything. And they heard a great voice from heaven. Who is the they? I think the they for sure are the 2 witnesses. Personally, I think the they in verse 12 is the world. So I'm going to read it like that. I don't think I'm wrong. I could be. And the world. Because they've got this, I'm guessing, video camera trained on these men. And the world hears a great voice from heaven saying unto the 2 witnesses, come up hither. And they, the 2 witnesses, ascended up to heaven in a cloud, and their enemies beheld them. Another personal belief of mine, they're not going to go, shh. It's not going to be like that. I don't think. I think they're just going to slowly rise. And I think people are going to be looking at them with their mouths wide open. They're terrified. And when their feet get about a foot off the ground, look what happens. Mark's interpretation, okay? In the same hour, there was a great earthquake. I put it, their feet clear the ground. And as they're watching these 2 men ascend up into heaven, a great earthquake, so great that the 10th part of Jerusalem fell, and in the earthquake were slain of men 7,000. In an instant, a tenth of Jerusalem crumbles. 7,000 lose their life. And the last part of this totally blows my mind. And the remnant were affrighted and gave glory to the God of heaven. Was God through with them? Mm-mm. It was all in His plan. Do you realize what the latter part of verse 13 is saying? People were saved. At this point in time, I think, at this point in the tribulation, we're right, I think, at the end of that 7 years, people are saved. They thought, when they were having this party, they thought things were great. They were happy. They didn't know what happy was to the end of verse 13, and gave glory to the God of heaven. We'll end at verse 14. The second woe is past, and behold, the the third woe cometh quickly. We'll pick up here next week. That seventh trumpet is about to sound. But what just blows my mind, how angry would you and I be if someone that we sent to help people, they were treated like these two witnesses were? Yet God's love and His mercy, He didn't give up on people. He allowed them to be saved even at this stage of the game right here. We're done.